AskReddit by Teddy by. What's one thing a coworker boss has done that made you call HR or report them? My manager and some of his cronies stole the equivalent of $400,000 from a project worth $1.94 million that was basically my baby and had my name all over it. I was lead engineer, liaising with the client, and prepared the proposal that got the company the project. Went straight to the COO, who had hired me himself 2 years earlier, and presented comprehensive documentary evidence of everything, including deeds to land bought from embezzled funds. Regional manager and head of department both got forced out of the company. They are lucky they just get fired. They should be imprisoned for that. He pushed me on camera. I thought that because it was all on tape, this menace would finally go down. No action was taken, no punishment. But he finally got fired a few years later for having an affair with the wife of the Zamboni driver. Second-hand good, but you literally watched him push me on camera. The affair was your firing justification? Thanks, Orange County Sportsplex. Fucking ridiculous. I bet if the opposite happened you would have been canned immediately. Held the ladder for me when I was putting merchandise on the top shelf and made mum sounds while staring up my shirt, then said if I wore a bikini and sat around in a sunshade, he'd unload the entire freight shipment. Lost his damned mind and then lost his job. I'm picturing you both as heavy-set bearded men. I work with a hearing impaired guy who, one day on the job a few years ago, was listening to music through earbuds he wore under noise-cancelling headphones. He was pushing a cart and was walking in a designated and marked walkway but had his back turned on an approaching forklift, which was in the designated drive lane, on this guy's left. He was pushing one cart while pulling another, and when the one he was pushing began to drift, he wrenched it violently to his left to straighten it out, unknowingly flinging it into the path of the forklift as the driver tried to drive past. The driver slammed into the cart and sent it flying, but, as fate would have it, it didn't go crashing into anyone or anything. Rules where I work place responsibility for any forklift accident on the shoulders of whoever is driving it. If I hadn't come forward to report what that nincompoop did with the car. Had a real piece of work for a supervisor once thought he was king of the world because he had access to the scheduling system. He'd mess with people's schedules based on his personal likes and dislikes, often leaving crucial shifts undermanned if he had beef with someone. One time, he scheduled me for a closing shift right into an opening shift the next day, the infamous cloppening, after I declined to cover for his no-show friend. When I brought up the labor laws and our union's rules about minimum time between shifts, he just smirked and said I should be more flexible. Well, I bent all right straight to the union rep with a log of all the schedule shenanigans he'd pulled. It was such a satisfying day when they escorted him out with his plant and that cheesy world's best boss mug his mom probably gave him. I wanted to train in a certain position and my boss said he wasn't training any women in that area. And HR didn't do anything about it. Wow. That's bad. I had a boss that hired both men and women, but only invited the men to the annual steak dinner with the higher ups. The women had to work so the men could leave early. I worked with a group of teens and one of the boys would follow the girls around and offer massages and touch them on the arms and shoulders casually. He tried that with me and I told him not to touch me very forcefully, but the girls were hesitant to say anything. I don't think he was malevolent, but he had no filters. He once asked our older coworker if she was pretty when she was younger. So basically just a dumbass. But I couldn't let him keep pestering the girls, so I reported him. A male coworker sent a copy and paste text to 26 girls that said he felt God meant for them to be together and that he felt a special connection with them. God works in mysterious ways. Had a staff member verbally and physically assault members of my team, and had been getting away with it for 10 years before I started because anytime anyone complained the HR manager would say the victim was just racist, she was white, BTW, but with an accent. Her victims were all colors, creeds, genders. I recorded and recorded, kept notes, got witnesses involved, Treated it like a freaking court case, and it took nearly 5 years, but I got both her and the HR manager fired. Not technically HR, I don't think we had an hour. Or corporate probably did, but IDK how I would have contacted them. It was a chain restaurant, but I went above him. It was a myriad of complaints, but he got personal with another employee in the freezer, which is just unsanitary. Also he sold moldy food and he just cut off the mold, which you can't do. I met someone who used to cut the mold off. It's fine, this is what they used to do decades ago. It's isolated and honestly it probably won't do any harm if you ate it. Looked at him in amazement. Technically true. You'll likely not be harmed. Consumed mold on bread. Hell, did it myself the other night by accident on a baguette. But still not something you frickin' do. As it happens, at the time, I was doing my masters and had a mold contamination issue in my experiments. I had documented everything for the write-up, including pictures on the macro level, then pictures of the Hiffy under the microscope to show how far it had run in the experiment. Showed the dude the pictures and you just saw the color drain from his face. He never did it again afterwards. In the Air Force we had a guy get orders to an isolated remote assignment to South Korea. Dude was a quiet married guy and 2 of my coworkers kept giving him shit about no women being around. Then our boss tells him that he'll location, but the time he comes home, we all look at him like, huh? He squints his eyes, sticks out his upper teeth and then acts like he's masturbating and says all the G-word slur for Koreans look like that because they have to masturbate, and that isolated remote means that's all he'll be doing. Everyone laughs except for me since I am Korean. Yeah, I went to our unit inspector general. I always thought the G-word slur was for Vietnamese people. I'm sorry, you had the wrong slur used against you and your people. I texted him during a video call to let him know that his underwear appeared to be visible. He looked at the text, and instead of taking the opportunity to adjust himself, he smirked. He then sent me a smiley face in response. I replied with, and I will never forget the look on his face when he realized he fucked up. My boss confronted a female coworker at a convention and used swear words and assault in front of customers. Yes, he got walked out. I told the CEO about how one of the directors was using the hiring process like his personal Tinder, and his behavior towards female employees was sexist at best and actual sexual predation at its worst. My hours were cut. They knew. They had bonded over long lines in the bathroom. Insisted upon a guy working on the same day he was burying his wife who was murdered. Their boss was fired. My wife and I worked for the same hospital, in different, both office, not patient facing, departments. We'd eat lunch together but otherwise not see each other during the day, and during work hours we were not physical with each other at all. If you didn't know that was my wife, you'd assume we were just co-workers. Right at the start of COVID, when management was figuring out how to send us home, my team lead came up to me and loudly told me working from home is a privilege, and you better not be fucking while clocked in. I was livid, and went straight to management. Really racist talk. This woman, though she was the goddamned boss and would constantly say racist shit towards my team. Fuckity fuck. No. You work for me. I just didn't present myself as your boss when you got hired. I reported her 2 times until she got fired. She started doing her job without being told who her boss was. What kind of job is this? I am indigenous, Eastern Band Cherokee. My boss discovered this and felt the need to share his favorite Indian joke with me. I told him it was offensive. He told me to get thicker red skin. Then walked out into the main area of the building and repeated the joke. I said out loud still racist the second time and he lost his ever-loving shit, yelling and crying about wokeness ruining society like a rich boomer that has never been wrong about anything in their entire lives. I went immediately to HR, but knowing HR is the boss's bestie, I said I am not filing a report, but I want this conversation on the record in the event retaliatory action is taken against me. That was about a year ago, and if I wasn't making so much money for the company, cleared about $800k net profit for him last year when my salary is sub $60k. Yeah, it's not great, I know. I would have been fired without cause a long time ago. This is the same dude that fired a pregnant woman about 2 weeks before she was due because her last few weeks of performance had not been satisfactory. She spent too much time in the bathroom and required too many breaks. Translation: he didn't want to pay her maternity leave. A couple years back, one of the cooks at the restaurant I was working at, 35M, would message me, 16F, after hours and would be very physical at work when we were on the same shift. I caught her lying and called her out on it. She brushed me off, so I filed a report with HR. I left before she did, but her act finally caught up with her to where she finally gave her notice and didn't even show up for the last 2 weeks. Giving lingerie to someone who was there through either work study or some workers' comp situation. Lingerie donor also ran for a local office and roped this poor girl into making her signs and campaign buttons. The employee being harassed was a graphic designer by trade. I was leaving the job anyway, so I outed her to basically anyone who would listen, including the CEO. It took a while, but the lingerie donor is no longer an employee there, and now sells life insurance part-time. Making inappropriate comments of a sexual nature, creating a hostile work environment. Not quite HR but the GM. Our job didn't really have an HR. We had an older guy who was on the spectrum, and would throw temper tantrums over little things. One day he was having one of his moments. Told him to take a second. He got into my face fairly aggressively, so I told him to fuck off. Emailed our GM the next day and told him we needed to talk about the situation. It didn't happen for a few days, and by then, we had calmed things over between us. I got reprimanded for telling the guy to fuck off, which whatever makes sense, I could have handled it better, but the guy was twice my size and in a rage, so didn't know how else to handle it. Manager was bullying an awkward guy in my team, saying he was probably gay, laughing it up. This was in one of Canada's largest banks and our VP was on it. No place for disrespect and homophobia. Got hired to do trade show stuff, but I couldn't start until a month or so. They were fine with that, but one guy just kept texting me about when I could begin. I kept telling him that it wouldn't be until April. He just kept going until it got a bit creepy. Then I got a picture text with something like, "Did I show you who you'll be working with? Does this change your mind?" The picture was what looked like 2 teenaged girls in cheesecake poses. They were younger than my own daughter. Then I gave their HR a ring.